So here's the definition from Merriam-Webster on collusion: a secret agreement or cooperation, especially for an illegal or deceitful purpose. So we found out there was definitely collusion. We knew a lot of it, I think, even if I recall correctly, before the thing started. I mean, some of the stuff we had found out, like the Don Jr., etc. meeting with that Russian lawyer. And, so that's secret cooperation for a deceitful purpose. Now, Mueller, as summarized by Barr, is supposedly saying, yeah, well, there wasn't any of the, direct criminal, like, do this and we'll pay you money, do this for us and it'll count as money. And, it makes sense because evidently Trump was basically hiding his business contacts, the Trump Moscow Tower and other business contacts. During the election, he out and out said, flat out said, I have nothing to do with Russia, and he was negotiating at that exact time for a Trump Tower. So when he was asking the Russians to hack things, he did have a personal back channel to them. But, as a private citizen, not president, just a candidate so far, that in itself isn't automatically illegal. It it should be illegal, I think, to tell such a blatant lie. I mean, obviously, in a campaign, you couldn't have a very strict definition for lying. I mean, people can change their mind. Things can be interpreted differently or even reinterpreted. But something as blatant as, no, I'm not doing anything with Russia, and he gets elected, and then, oh, but he was. So there was collusion, but evidently not a direct exchange, not a conspiracy, according to what Barr says Mueller has said. And I pretty much believe that. Some people have pointed out that it says specifically the Russian government, like maybe other Russians. But I don't think they could have been campaign contribution type stuff, or he would, or for the campaign, a quid pro quo. It could be these other connections, and it wouldn't be an interference in the election, which was the scope of this particular. And we knew Mueller was taking the scope seriously, maybe too seriously, maybe too narrow. Um, you know, just because he sent off some of the documents that need to be prosecuted, he let other people do it. Um, so he did go after Manafort, and he did go after Cohen, um, presumably to get him to flip. And frankly, I think it was entirely worth it. For one thing, because of the Manafort, the confiscation of some of his illicit money, I believe it came out in the black. But that's neither here nor there. Um, I personally am glad that it was exposed that he was lying, just if only for, if the president's unindictable, then, it has to be weighed in the court of public opinion. So we have to know. And that's something to know, that he says I have nothing to do with Russia, while he's trying to make the biggest deal of his life. And as far as why is everybody's acting like, well, then I don't understand why he'd be friendly to Russia. Well, because when everything's over, he probably still wants to make that Trump Moscow. Turns out they were just barely smart enough not to be trying to make it while he was president, as far as we know. Um, but, I mean, that basic friendliness or business, certainly you wouldn't necessarily want to ruin that, right? Um, in fact, I'm sure there's dreams of having all kinds of locations when it's, the Trump presidential palace in Dubai or whatever. Um, so, I think he hoodwinked the implorables. The deplorables also were hoodwinked. Um, because I don't think he's going to come through for them. But he's given them a lot of red meat in terms of, making the topic be things they like to talk about, um, that they want to face, closing borders and things like that. But I don't think he'll give them anything of substance. It's all empty calories. And the implorables, it's like, what the fuck are you guys? Like, if you're a bald Detroit guy that used to be for Kucinich and you're for Trump, it's like, those are the implorables. I mean, we implore you, come back to your senses. And I wasn't even a Kucinich supporter, but come on, that's quite reasonable. Not just in comparison, it's pretty reasonable on its own, but in comparison, it's like a million light years. So the implorables definitely got hoodwinked, totally hoodwinked. They're not getting what they wanted. Now, will they ever see it? I don't know. People get really invested in it, and I remember when I was younger being invested in certain political figures like that. I was kind of like that about Jerry Brown when he was running against Bill Clinton, who was just a blow-dried idiot as far as I was concerned, all wrapped up in the South American drug and arms trade through the Mina airport and protecting the bullshit going on there. And I think that's where it was, Mina. And but I went off on a little tangent. But anyway, I think these hoodwinked deplorables, fine, fuck them. Implorables, it's like, come back to sanity. Understand that there's other ways to hate on the Democratic Party that's assholes than cozy up to the very worst side of the Republicans. Things aren't going to swing so far. I mean, we're not going to. I mean, I argued against political correctness back in college when I heard it on campus before, when it was a term before the regular public had heard it. And I was against it. I'm like, no, that's not what liberalism is about. Liberalism is not a dogmatic philosophy, not properly. It's supposed to be rational. And it's not just that you're open-minded, like you're going to change your mind. It's you're open-minded and you realize other people come to other conclusions. It's not open-minded that I'm going to change my mind with the wind. It's open-minded realizing there's more than just your opinion. And you could be totally certain, and you have to be open as much as possible to allowing and tolerating to tolerance of other people's opinions as much as possible, which is not infinite. But it goes pretty far. Basically, if you could be sure that somebody's not going to do violence, then you can tolerate their opinion. The iffy part comes because so many of our opinions get to a violent level of zealous belief in among humans that it's hard to know. You don't want to wait until it's very disastrous. You don't want to move too soon, and yet it seems like always, like right now, there's obviously right-winger violence, and there's left-winger violence, and there's middle-winger, and I think it's all psychotic, but it certainly is a human characteristic, so it goes with all ideologies, if not all in the same proportion or for the same reasons or with the same targets. That's the real main enemy. But of course, we could still say somebody was hoodwinked by, a con man who did collude, evidently not criminally as far as the collusion, but looks like a lot of other crimes, which is, why he was lying. It wasn't because he had hired the Russians or he'd accepted $1 million and help from the Russians or whatever it would be, right? He didn't have a meeting with Putin going, let's fuck over the United States. He, as far as Mueller found out, evidently, though we still haven't seen the report. And but yeah, no, it looks like none of that kind of thing happened. So he was lying for a different reason, which we have a lot of information about what that reason is now. And it was pretty easy to guess. But sometimes stuff has to be brought right out in the total raw open before it's, obvious isn't good enough. You need evidence like we have now.